All right. Well, it looks like we're ready, right, Renee?
Yes, recording is on.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first talk out of 3 today. Ours is Assessment Resources and Introduction to LibGuide and Terminology, and I'm Lee Edwards, and Kathryn Hicks will join in about halfway through. You want to say hello, Kathryn? Go right ahead.
Good morning.
All right, so like I said, this is the first of 3 presentations. And you can go on to the next slide, thank you. And so what we're here to do today through the whole, if you sit through all 3 of these, we hope that you'll have all the tools necessary to participate in effective review, revision, and improvement of the assessment processes for your respective programs. So like I said, the first one starts off with the LibGuide and some terminology. And of course, the terminology you're going to hear again in session 2 and session 3. So we just wanted to go ahead and give that terminology to you, and then it might make sense even more as the more you hear it throughout the day. So session 2 is with assessment roadmaps, mapping and tracking, and Kim Silver and Deborah Hadaway. And session 3 is assessment analysis, next steps, data analysis, action plan, and closing the loop. So our session begins with defining assessment, like what is this whole big process? And so assessment is the processes for deciding what we want our students to learn and make sure that they learn it. So you can think of this as program level, course level. And so we use these assessment results to improve our teaching, to see where, we might have some weak spots or how we're doing well, learning and student success. So you probably heard the words learning outcomes, success outcomes. And so we're gonna try to straighten them out for you. So learning outcomes just in general are what students will be able to do as a result of a learning experience. And so under learning outcomes, we have something called core competency outcomes. And that's some sort of an upper level shared by all graduates of the college. Core competencies are things like where we assess them for communication skills, information literacy, critical thinking, professionalism, those kinds of things. Those are core competency outcomes. And then we all have course learning outcomes. So that's at the course level. And those are things, skills, content, all students in multiple sections of a course should learn. And then we have success outcomes. And these are indirect measures of student learning. And that's where you see things where you're tracking retention, graduation rates, employer, graduate surveys, those kinds of things. And so success outcomes are a little different than the learning outcomes because they're about learning, and that's what makes them indirect. So they're about learning rather than a direct demonstration of learning. A few more terms that you're going to hear, measures. And that's what we use to actually evaluate the achievement of the learning outcome. The benchmark is like the minimally acceptable student achievement. So we want to at least get to the benchmark. The target is the proportion of students who should achieve at least the minimally acceptable level. And then you're always asked for artifacts in Watermark, and those are samples of student work. And we like to have them where they show all different levels of student achievement. And then at the very end of the process, we always like to close the loop because we don't want to just do assessment one time. We might have to act on some action plans or maybe some things that we need to work on. And so we need to continuously make sure that we have evidence of learning and that we are showing improvement. So here is sort of the cycle in one snapshot. So if you start at the course level, so at the top left-hand corner, when we talk about course level assessment, that's where you're assessing on those learning outcomes just with each course. And then we go up to program level, And that's where you start introducing those core competencies, you know, communication, information literacy, stuff like that. The success outcomes, retention, persistence, and you start working on your academic program review. When you look at the whole college level assessment, we start bringing in core competencies across all the programs. So that's why people were sending core competency information to Anna Scott. We're going to compile all that. We look at the assessment plan evaluations and kind of bring that all in and look at it as an institution. So institutional effectiveness data. And so what we're trying to support with all of this, or what is sort of driving a lot of this, is the vision, the mission of the college, the values. What we've put out there is our strategic imperatives, and SACS is a big driver for all of this assessment. They're asking for us to make sure that we cover all our bases. So this little graphic, you're going to see this a couple more times today. So it's a nice little graphic that shows that it really is a continuous improvement process. It's not like you do assessment one time and then you're done. We constantly are going in a loop. So you're going to start out in that upper right hand where it says plan. So you determine your outcomes. So you establish this clear, observable, expected outcomes for student learning at both the course and program level. So after you get your outcomes, then you actually do, as it says in the bottom right. So we teach and learn. So we ensure that students have sufficient opportunities to achieve these goals in our courses and our program. Then we assess. So that means we systematically gather, analyze, and interpret evidence of how well the student learning meets these goals. And then we use that resulting information to understand and improve student learning. So we revise and reinforce in the ACT part of the cycle. And so here we have Dr. Kathryn Hicks.
Good morning. So we want to talk about a couple of things to go back to the outcomes and how to create them in a way that they're going to be measurable and effective for your classes and for your APR, for all of your assessment processes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to move to the LibGuide and show you some of the resources that we have available for you guys. And kind of walk you through that so that you can familiarize yourselves with all the tools that are out there to help you through all of these different stages and steps of the process. So when you're writing your outcomes for your, let's talk about it in terms of a course, just because we can kind of keep it on that level. So think about this at the course level, but it would also apply when you're thinking about it beyond. We want to make sure that we're using clear and specific language. So we don't want to talk about students understanding something or learning something. There's no way for us to measure that. And so there's no way for us to really be able to utilize that in the assessment process. So we want to make sure that we're using action verbs that are specific, that are discrete. So one particular thing, we can't have like compound outcomes where there's multiple tasks or multiple concepts that the students need to learn within the same outcome. So each one should have a single verb and then a result. So what can the students do after they've learned or received the content that you've given them? They should be realistic, but also rigorous. So we don't want to set our standards low. We want to make sure that our students are being motivated and pushed to succeed, and that they are getting all the information that they need in order to be the best, so that we can fulfill those things that we were talking about in terms of our mission and our vision, that we really are providing that world-class high-level education that we expect from our students. This next one, not too broad, not too specific. I know that sounds like nothing, right? But it's hard to find that middle line. And a lot of that takes practice in terms of not, we can't give them the world in one outcome, but we also can't have an outcome that's just a task. Like a student will know how to take a patient's blood pressure. You know, that's a skill. That's not a learning outcome that would be appropriate for something like what we're doing here. So make sure that we're kind of threading that needle appropriately there. And it, like I said, it takes practice. We are willing to work with you on a lot of those. We spend a lot of time kind of tweaking outcomes and making sure they're better. And as programs go through these processes, it is the same for you guys. So, you know, you might have had outcomes in the past that don't necessarily fit the standards or fit exactly what we're talking about here. But as we go on and we work through this process, we improve those outcomes, which helps us improve our teaching, helps us improve our delivery of content to students and all of those kinds of things. So just continuing to work with it. I'll give you an example. Our arts and sciences, AA, AS degrees, those kinds of things are in the APR cycle right now. And so that's a little bit of a different situation than some of you who have very specific programs with more isolated skills, I guess would be the way to say that. Arts and sciences works a little bit differently. And so within that, each department is to be going through courses and looking at course outcomes and making sure that they're appropriate. And so within the English department, we've been working on that the last few weeks, which this is an undertaking anyway. It's more of an undertaking when you get a room full of people who are there for the language in the first place, and then they're tasked with, you know, specifying the language and getting everything perfected. But, you know, a wonderful thing that has come out of that is that I feel like we've really started to take ownership of what we're doing. So we're making sure that the courses that we're teaching are matching up to the course description that's in the CAC, because that's sort of our standard, right? We've got to cover the things that the catalog of approved courses from the state says that we're covering within those courses, but then we get to set the learning outcomes for our particular classes and the way we're teaching all of the sections of those classes. And so it used to be that they were numbered out, like the learning outcomes in each course were kind of categorized and then numbered within those categories. And we had revised them a few years ago, and we stuck to that format because I guess we just felt like we needed to, because it had been that way for so long. And now this time when we're pulling them apart again, this is where I feel like we've really taken ownership of them, and we've revised them. We've taken out the categories and the numbers, and we're really just saying this is exactly what we're doing in an English 101, an English 102, a lit course, those kinds of things. And we feel like it much more closely reflects our standard of teaching and the way we're going about that and providing that information to our students. So like I said, it takes time. It's not something that you're going to get perfect the first time, and it's going to change. We're going to look at these things, and that's why we have this cyclical nature of APR and the assessment process, is so that we can continue to make improvements to our programs and our outcomes. And then the last one, I think I already said, no compound statements, or we can't have more than one outcome in a single statement. And that's why I said we could only use one verb per statement, because that makes it really clear and concrete. So in order to do this, this is just sort of a technique. You guys are probably familiar with this because we teach it to our students when we're talking about goals, right? So the SMART acronym here, specific, of course, we talked about already. Measurable is probably the most important one, because if we're trying to use these outcomes to pull data, there's got to be something that we can quantify, right? In terms of, you know, how many students were successful on a particular item. So making sure that you're using a verb that's measurable. And I'm going to show you when we get to the LibGuide some places where you can go to get some taxonomy charts and some verbs that would be great for this. Action oriented, certainly we want them to be, the students to be actively learning a particular thing. And so we want to write the outcomes to reflect that. Certainly we want them to be reasonable. Like I said, we want to set our expectations high for our students because we know that they're capable of doing that, but we also we're time bound in the course of one semester, right? So we have 14 weeks or 7 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on your program and the way your courses are delivered. to get this information across to the students. And so making sure that what we have within the course can be delivered in that time frame is reasonable, right? And then of course, time-based, that we do have these certain amounts of lab hours, classroom hours, weeks in the semester, all of those kinds of things. And so all of those items we need to take into consideration when we're looking at the outcomes. And like I said, here at the bottom of the slide, this applies at the program level as well as at the course level. So a couple of just tools for you guys as you're looking at doing the learning outcomes and going through the assessment process and all of those kinds of things. The first one is a book called Assessing Student Learning. It's by Linda Susky. She is kind of, I guess, one of the top names in the assessment field, especially in our region. She participates in a lot of the SACS conferences and delivers information to those who attend those conferences about learning outcomes and also about data collection and all of those kinds of things, and analyses and all of those. So keep her name in mind, keep this particular title in mind. It's certainly something that can be a great reference guide for you. In addition to that, of course, Bloom's taxonomy is sort of the standard. We have kind of moved into more of a revised Bloom's, and we've also used some more technical taxonomies for some of our other more technical programs. So this is not the end all be all. There may be one that better fits what you're actually delivering in terms of your content. But this is sort of where it all originated, is with Bloom's. And then the other thing is our academic assessment LibGuide, which is what I'm going to show you. And some of the resources that I just mentioned are available when you click through that LibGuide. So I want to take a few minutes just to sort of walk you through the different tabs on the LibGuide and let you know what you're going to see there, and how to use it most effectively. So give me just a second. I'm going to stop sharing this, and then I'm going to move over to sharing my my other screen, which has the LibGuide pulled up. Okay, so does that look good? Is everybody seeing my assessment guide? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just want to make sure I get confirmed before I move through here. So, okay, so opening page on our LibGuide, this is the home page. And actually, let me show you how I got here. Because when I got here this morning, I thought, let me go ahead and get the LibGuide pulled up. But actually, I think I would like to show you how I got to the LibGuide, because that might be really important. So if you go to our GTC homepage, the quickest way for me to get to our LibGuides, any of them, is to go to Academics and Learning and then go to Library Search. And then once you get to the Library Search, then you can go directly from the Research tab on the drop-down menu to Research Guides. And then conveniently, because it's alphabetical, this is the very first thing in the list. And so it's really easy to see and access. And we have tons of great guides here. So it's nice that this one happens to be at the top because it's quick. So that brings us back to the homepage of the LibGuide, which is where I started this whole thing. And of course, you see here a graphic that Lee's already talked about a little bit, and you'll see these graphics repeated throughout because we're kind of reinforcing a lot of the stuff that we're telling you this morning and that we'll continue to work with through the assessment process. So this is sort of the assessment process cycle graphic here at the top. It also includes information about people on our assessment committee. And that's important because we have representatives from throughout the college on our assessment committee. And so, like I was talking about stuff in arts and sciences, but maybe that's not really applicable to you, or you can't translate that very well into your own particular program. But what you can do is look at this list and find somebody who's in your school or in your department, because one of the goals of this is to have good representation from across the college, be it health sciences, business and computer technology, manufacturing, all our different areas, because things work a little bit differently in each one. And so this is a group of people who are here to help you, support you, and answer your questions. So if you see a name here that you recognize from your area, that might be a good person to reach out to and just get some help with some of these things. So that information is there. Also on the homepage, you've got the details about the committee and that kind of thing. But even more importantly, we've got our information from the assessment newsletters that Jan sends out, and those have like our due dates, any important reminders, all of those kinds of things. And we archive all of those right here on the home page. So if you forgot or you can't find the email, you know, in your inbox or whatever the case may be, you can just pop in right here and go find the latest reminders or things that need to get done. So that's the first page of it. The next page has a number of different options in terms of the different parts of assessment. So these will probably be things that you're going to see throughout the morning today. And this gives you an opportunity to refer back to them and see them again. So the different components of assessment are here, and you'll see on the screen here, starting at the very top with the mission and moving through the student learning outcomes, course outcomes, how those tie to the core competencies, and then our action plans and moving along from there. In addition to that, we've got pages here with curriculum mapping. There's a presentation here from a couple of years ago that was used to explain that a little bit, which you can click through that and get more information. There's also the template for your curriculum map, which is how you line up all of your courses with the different learning outcomes and then determine whether you're introducing, reinforcing, or assessing a particular outcome at whatever stage in your program. So you can take a look at that, and that's an Excel file that you can use to delineate those things. You also got a graph here. It's a little bit small, but it kind of gives you the process of, you know, moving forward, moving ahead in how this is going to work in terms of your curriculum mapping and those kinds of things. And I'm not going to go to every single one, but I do want to look at the outcomes here and the information there, because this is something that's important to this first part of the presentation. So here is a thorough definition, more words than we would want to put on a PowerPoint slide, but it gives you some information about learning outcomes and kind of goes into detail about what we described this morning. And then here are some of our taxonomy links. Excuse me. So this gives you a kind of a clearinghouse of places where you can go, some references and resources and those kinds of things in order to get those taxonomies and that kind of thing. So if you take a look here, this is Bloom's, and this is the revised version. And so this is a really clear one. It's not fun and color coded like some of the other ones, but it's kind of nice because it just gives you everything right direct in front of you. So it's building from over here to the left-hand side of the page, the simpler, more fundamental type of outcomes, all the way up to the more advanced outcomes, which we would potentially see our students do in some of the higher level courses. So this one's really easy to follow. But then in addition to that, we've got Finks here. We've got a resource about writing learning outcomes, those kinds of things. So there's a lot here that's helpful to you to use as a resource for your different projects in terms of writing your outcomes. And then more graphics here just to kind of run through the different questions. What do we want our students to do? And it's kind of a checklist. It's kind of our rubric for, did you get the learning outcome correct? You know, is it how you want it to be? So you can use that evaluating option here. And then these are just some examples of some do's and don'ts when it comes to using action verbs in your outcomes. So I'm going to move to the next tab, which is our APR tab, Academic Program Review. And this is sort of the warehouse of all the information that you need for the different stages of the assessment cycle. And as Lee mentioned earlier, this isn't a process where there's a starting line and a finish line. It's going on throughout the year. So even if you're not in the year where you're actually doing your APR and presenting at the end of that academic year and those kinds of things, you're still following up on action plans from previous years in which you have been doing those things. So all that information is here. You've got your timelines with all your deadlines and all those kinds of things, which are important to keep track of, as well as links for different presentation templates, all of those, the APR template. You've got your curriculum map here again, so you can get that if you need it. And then different templates in order to enter your data. And all of those are part of the APR process. This tab, of course, is just for our overall assessment information. It gives us the cycle, gives us a glossary. So looking at those terms again, if you want to go back and reference that. And then the next tab, which I'm going to look at quickly before I get to the last tab, is some of the overall assessment information that we need to have. And you see Linda Susky's name here again with a link to some of her content, which is really helpful, as well as some other exemplars within assessment. So other areas that do assessment really well that we can use as examples, and then also just some sort of academic information about the assessment process and the Journal of Assessment in Higher Education. And then I want to spend, I know I'm running short on time and I'm sorry to talk quickly, but I do want to show you this last tab because it is super important, because this is where you access Watermark, which is our software system for uploading all of your outcomes, your artifacts, documents, evidence, all that stuff is right here. And this very first link, of course, takes you directly to Watermark where you can log in, as you see, and that it's probably the quickest. Sorry, it's being slow this morning, but that's probably the quickest access point to get to Watermark. And so you'll see it keeps you signed in, so you don't have to remember your password all the time, which is really nice. So if you keep doing that from your same browser or from the LibGuide, it will keep you there. And you'll see, just like on my homepage, everything that you're responsible for will pop right up at the beginning. And in addition to that, we've got some modules that Jan created, which are soft chalk lessons, which help you with Watermark. And it literally walks you through every step of the process and what you need to do in order to use that tool or that piece of software effectively. So make sure if you have questions about that, that you're referring back to this. And I'm going to stop sharing the LibGuide and go back to my slides real quick, because I just have some contact information that I want to share. And I saw that we were had a couple of things in the chat, so I want to make sure that I don't ignore those.
I had just put the LibGuide link in the chat. That's all that's there right now.
Oh, great.
You're
Okay.
good.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So you should be seeing my slides again. Is that true? Okay. Excellent. So that's my closing. Is we're here for you guys. Lee and I are over in the dental building. I know that's kind of far away from a lot of our academic programs and stuff like that, but that's where we live. So that's building 112. We're maybe 3 or 4 doors down from the CPE. I know everybody's familiar with where the CPE is. So to kind of give you some points for navigation there, you're welcome to visit, or you've got our email addresses and our extensions. Call us anytime. We're happy to help you walk through these steps, or just kind of get you over a stumbling block or something like that. So thank you guys for joining us this morning. If there are any questions, we're happy to use these last couple of minutes that we have to answer those. And if not, we can take a little bit of a break. I do see a question that Jackie says, where can faculty locate the recording of this session? Renee did hit the record button at the very beginning, and we're going to put it in the LibGuide. That'll be the first place it goes for sure. And then we're going to send, Lee and I are going to send some follow-up documents from this session next week. So we'll send that link along with the follow-up documents, and we'll also put it in our curriculum notes newsletter the beginning of December. And it may end up some other places too, but you'll at least get it from those different places. Any other questions? Oh, I see another chat. Yes. Okay. You are welcome. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. All right. Okay. Well, it's 9:30 on the dot. So thank you again for joining us this morning. We are going to take a brief 15-minute break before session 2 begins with Deborah and Kim. So if you want to just stretch your legs, take a little bit of a walk or whatever, check your Outlook real quick, whatever you need to do. We will be back here and ready to go at 9:00.